All right. Welcome, everyone. Hi. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for our Intro to Startup Scene and Ask Me Anything with Monica Landers. My name is Helena Krusek, and I'm the Senior Corporate Venture Associate with Capital Factory. Before we get started with our session, I want to take just a moment to bring up our CEO, Josh Baer, to share a little bit more about Capital Factory.
Capital Factory is the center of gravity for entrepreneurs in Texas. Thousands of entrepreneurs, programmers, and designers gather day and night, in person and online, for meetups, classes, and co-working. And with our team spread across the state in Austin, Dallas, Houston, and San
Uh-oh. I think we lost the video mid.
Capital Factory is the center of gravity for entrepreneurs in Texas. Thousands of entrepreneurs, programmers, and designers gather day and night, in person and online, for meetups, classes, and co-working. And with our team spread across the state in Austin, Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio, we meet all the best entrepreneurs in Texas and introduce them to the people that they need to meet most: investors, customers, and talent to grow their team. We watch all of this happen so that we have this unique insight into the market and use that to invest in all the best companies.
All right, looks like we're having some technical difficulties there. Sorry about that. Welcome to the future of a post-COVID world, I guess. But anyway, thank you to Josh Baer for the introduction. If you ever get a chance to hear him give the entire thing, it's definitely worth it. And coming to visit our spaces in Austin when you get the chance. As a reminder, Capital Factory has a lot of resources to get you plugged into the ecosystem here in Texas. Whether you're just beginning or you're further along in your startup journey, it's something for everyone. We host this AMA series monthly to provide monthly information on all of these resources and additional information from around the state. We'll be taking questions from the audience in just about 20 minutes. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat and we will take a note of them and move forward towards the end. As mentioned earlier, we have the pleasure today of hosting Monica Landers. Monica is the founder and CEO of StoryFit, a rapid growing technology company which provides AI analytics for the publishing and entertainment industry. With 2 media technology patents, Monica's deep experience in media extends from producing for ABC News and Good Morning America to executive leadership at multiple content companies, including VP Media, Innovation, and Demand Media. Monica has deep roots in Austin's startup community and is an advisor to Techstars and Comcast accelerators, University of Texas and Texas State Universities, and organizations such as South by Southwest and Women at Austin. So with that being said, I'd love to bring Monica up to the virtual stage. Monica, how are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Good. All right. So first things first, before we jump into questions, bios are awesome, and it's always great to be able to read some information on who you're going to be talking to. But I'd love to just hear you speak a little bit more about yourself and your background and some of the more meaningful things that have gotten you to where you are today.
Yeah, I think about the first kind of part of my career, which was almost 10 years with ABC, and it was always covering breaking news. The difference then was that we had infinite, compared to being an entrepreneur, infinite resources, right? So it was really about getting the job done. There's no reason to fail. Find the story, tell the story, and do whatever you need to do to make it happen. And I think it's really interesting now. I'm at the opposite end of always scrambling for resources and always kind of low resources. It was still great experience because it really taught me okay, there's no reason to fail here. I have everything available to me. What can I do to make it happen? And I think that's what we have to do now, even with lack of resources in small companies, is really be open-minded. So it was a good way really to kick off, I think, where I am now. I had a lot of experience, during my career of managing both development teams and content teams and, large and small teams, public companies, private companies, and startup. But I hadn't started my own company before. And so even with lots of experience in doing different types of tasks and being and working closely with founders and being on founding teams, it's still different to start your own company and to raise the money and put it together. And so even with, I think on paper, looking like I had a good bit of experience, I certainly relied on the community in the local startup community to really gain more information, understanding that I needed to be successful. So I really appreciate that. And I think you don't know what you don't know till you don't know it. And it's that's when it's really good to have the support network in place to fill in the gaps.
Totally. Yeah, no, that's really great to hear. And that's, you've been around in this community for such a long time, and that the community is sort of the backbone of why Capital Factory is here and why we do what we do. So definitely great to hear all of that echoed in your background. So you spoke about it a little bit, talking about the very beginning of your experience, some of the challenges that you faced. I'd like to dig into that a little bit more. So you mentioned that you never started a company before. Could you talk a little bit about why you decided to start this business and some of the challenges you might have faced at the beginning?
Yeah, and I'd been on early teams, so I'd come in as, the second or third hire. I think another time was the fourth hire. So really early on teams, and also worked on startups where it was led by, a CEO who could raise 47 million with an idea, right? And so I came in with ideas of fundraising that were like, well, that's the only thing I don't know how to do. This surely I can figure that part out, So I think I really came in like early days, just being very clear on what I wanted to build. It was an extension from the work I'd done on content and just predicting success of content within audiences. So it seemed natural to take it more to long form, whether it was books or movies or television, which is where we work now, and being able to identify from early script stage, who's the audience for this? And so, we use natural language processing, machine learning to ingest thousands and thousands of scripts and then analyze what are the particular elements within the story that appeals to a particular audience. It's not a one size fit all. No one thinks that any one film is going to get everyone available in the audience. So it's always about picking, what's the right audience we should go after. If we make changes in the film, how can that increase the audience? So these are the kind of questions that we answer. But when I was starting it out, we had an idea of how to build the, basic prototype. I had, a group of co-founders. I had, I think, a good hiring network. I didn't have the fundraising network. And so that's really what I was focused on early on, is trying to first understand who I needed to talk to and how I needed to talk to them. And then to start that process of just building the company with resources.
Awesome. So I was taking some notes there because I'm just hearing some interesting things. I want to make sure that we kind of dig into those, because I'm hoping we have some founders in the audience, whether they're, starting their own company or if they've already done so and they're looking for best practices. I want to make sure that we're speaking to them. So one thing I heard you say in there was particularly the technology, thinking about, like the native language processing and the specific type of technology. A lot of founders, I'm sure you know this, feel like they kind of have to do it all themselves, right? They might feel like they have to do the coding. They've got to source everything. Was that something where you had that technology background, or how did you land on that technology to use and getting into that stage?
I had the background of managing teams, but I'm not an engineer background, but I was familiar enough to ask the right questions and find the right people. And so, and a lot of it was testing. So there was some early AI we did, and, AI is like this big, broad word, but there's not someone who knows, AI, like there's very niche. And at first when we were exploring different methods, I would pull in one person for a small project that was just a proof of concept, and then someone else. So we did a lot of kind of piecemeal. And so I think it worked for me because I had the capacity to coordinate that and to understand and say, like, wait, if we test this here and this works, then I can do this other piece and this other piece. And so that's really how we started, is very piecemeal. A lot of times too, because we weren't paying either very much or anything, there was a lot of people who are interested that would do one piece of it. Like, well, I'll do this, or I'll run this for you, or I'll pull this. And so I could get those pieces and just kind of keep track of, like, what am I testing each time? And so that's really how I could put it together, because I think you'll find there's always enthusiasm. It's easy to find enthusiasm for something that's very short term. It's really hard to get people on board of, like, okay, now we're going to do this for a whole year and I'm not going to pay you anything. I don't know if it's going to work, and sure, I'll give you equity, but it's probably not going to be worth anything. Like, that's a real hard sell. But can you do something that's really cool that people are curious about, and they'll spend an hour with you to talk about it? Sure. Will they spend maybe 8 hours one weekend to test some piece of it? Yep, probably. And so I relied on that a lot early on, just to get kind of the proof cases. And then the part that I could do myself, just the selling, but with fundraising, but also selling and getting people on board, that was something I could do. And I do think I feel like that's certainly something I learned through years of management, is you just can't think that anyone's going to be good at everything. And so recognizing that in yourself as well as the people you're working with, and being really clear about, just because I ask you to design a beautiful deck doesn't mean you can design a beautiful deck. Mm-hmm. Like, who can really do these different things that would need to happen, I think is real important. And being really, honest with yourself and honest with the team about what are the holes that we have to fill. So I was able to fill a lot of the generic ones early on. Not great. Like, I can make decks. They're not the best, but I can make them to a point. So, and then finding help along the way. But I think the more honest you are about what you're good at and what you're not good at makes a big difference, because then you can really ask for help in those areas where you need help.
Yeah, totally. No, that's really good advice. So speaking of that, that equity, right? That being something that's, a percentage of something that might not be worth anything right now, you eventually had to turn that into dollars, right? And a lot of times folks do that by fundraising. So as a female founder, did you experience any difficulties in fundraising, or, do you have any recommendations or resources that you can share maybe for some of the female founders in the audience?
I mean, I think fundraising sucks anyway, like female or not female. So I've never done it as a male, so I have trouble comparing, but like, I just think it's really hard. So I try and be careful, like saying, well, was that because I was a woman, or was that just because it was hard? And so I just think we can just assume that it's hard and awful for sure. And I know there's people that love it. I've met them, and there's some people who are so good at it, and it's natural. And so I think that's wonderful. But I also just and try to be honest about it, so no one, when you're in the middle of it and miserable, you don't feel like you're the only one. Like you don't feel like, oh, this is so easy for everyone else. And all founders will tell the story of like, oh yeah, and I closed this deal, and then I raised this, and we did a quick round, and you can make it sound really easy, but underneath it, it's just always lots of work, and there's always lots of conversations. I mean, it's hundreds of people that I talk to for every round, and like, so that's a lot of no's, or just plain like no responses or ignorance. So I mean, I think it's a hard process. There are definitely a few weird things that absolutely happened because I was a woman, but I feel like that just is part of life. And so my approach is to try and just like, move on. And there's, I mean, I'd say out of the last 200 for the last round, there's probably there's one, VC I absolutely don't want to work with. I mean, just wouldn't work with. That's out of 200. So that's really, that's not bad, right?
Good. Those are pretty good statistics.
Yeah. And you know what? Maybe if I was a guy, I still wouldn't like them. So, who knows? So I try and kind of keep that on even. I think the hardest thing though is, there's a lot of really stereotypical things that women founders do. And it's always hard to talk about because it's like, well, no one wants to be stereotyped and no one wants to be generalized. So I guess I would just say the things to watch out for is that I see women more than men just trying to do everything and really, and having this bar and this expectation that is really hard to live up to. And so I think that by recognizing it's hard and asking for help and trying to get that network out, like you can't help that you graduated from college and you don't have, because it's mostly men that are going into the VC field, that you don't have 40 friends already there. Like you just can't help it. So you're going to have to make those friends, which is entirely possible. But I think it just takes prioritizing some of this relationship building that didn't happen naturally because they weren't your friends in college, and maybe they weren't your friends in the first job. Like, and the thing is, anything I'm saying can be true for men too, right? Like if you weren't in the right place at the right time and didn't already have that network built, you're just going to have to build it. But I'm just amazed at the ripple effect of networking. Like I really wasn't in the publishing industry before. I came from TV, but when I go to publishing events now, I can look across and see so many people that I know because of that. When I'm at Austin, whether it's Cat Factory or events, I can walk into a room and see, dozens of people that I know. Same with if I'm West Coast and doing Hollywood stuff, now I can, randomly walk into people I know on a studio lot, just like, that's just what networking does. And the sooner you can do it and the more time you can spend, there's just this wonderful ripple effect of introductions.
Absolutely. And that's a really good point as well. So that network is incredibly important. And so if you had to sort of reframe that for an earlier stage founder who's thinking about those resources, are there specific resources that you can call out that you would recommend for founders? Obviously, shout out to Capital Factory and this network for what we've built here. But do you have any other resources that you can recommend?
Yeah, and I think the main thing is your frame of mind is that it's part of your job, and like, just I try and really celebrate every time maybe some networking I did 2 years ago suddenly pays off by the most wonderful hire or a new investor or whatever it is, because that's sometimes how long it takes to bear fruit. So I think, first of all, approaching it with a real, like, this is part of my job now. I thought I was going to work and build a product, but no, I'm going to talk to people for hours on end. And once you kind of think, wait, that's part of my job now, is this talking and meeting with people, I think it sets a better tone. Like, this is actually your job to do this, and you got to do it now so that it pays off 2 years from now. And I think that sort of helps with the mentality. I really took it. I think I spent, and I don't remember now, it was really early on. Maybe it was for a month or 2 months. And my whole job was just, in my mind, capital factory, it's hard to say fast, capital factory networking. And so I just blocked off, I made an appointment for every single time slot and just did it 4 days a week. I think I made a whole month of it. I'd be interesting to find the calendar and see if I really did. In my mind, that's what I remember doing. And just really saying, this is what I'm going to do. And just having those conversations, because you could really iterate. In my head, I couldn't go build it, but in my head, I could iterate really fast through those conversations. And that was useful. And I was part of Techstars as well. That network works differently, right? It's a little bit more national, and it functions differently. I'm part of Women at Austin. That begins event driven and like small team driven. That network works differently. And I think just understanding, how each network works and how you can function and connect in it is really important. It took me a bit with Capital Factory to understand, man, you basically get out whatever you put in. Like, it's there, and you're not gonna like pour it down. Like, you really have to like set up the meetings and go to the events. And so I think if you look into these resources that are available, but really, I don't know, for me, talking people is, fairly easy, although when it goes on and on for days, it's hard, right? But really recognizing that connecting and to these people is what's going to help you build a strong company, helps me to just get out there and do it more versus staying in my own, space and working heads down in front of a computer.
Yeah, I very much get that. And so one thing you said, I think would be useful for some of the people in the audience. Each of those networks looks slightly different, right? Do you have any recommendations for what's the right way to engage with a mentor, whether or not that's through Capital Factory or Women at Austin? Are there like best practices you can recommend, or how do you get to a second meeting that's actually useful?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's nice about Capital Factory is, they're okay and they've made time for you, and they've made that 20-minute block, and so you can feel good about it. Because it is hard if you're just, at a large event and I just think of that children's book that says, "Are you my mother? Are you my mother? Are you my mother?" And it's like, you can't go to every person and be like, "Will you be my mentor? Will you be my mentor?" Because nobody has time, right? That's the hardest thing, is the time. And so I think just really understanding that person. And sometimes you don't, you have to be careful. Like, you don't really always need a mentor. Sometimes you just need an introduction or help with one question. And so I think I would change kind of your internal goal of like finding a mentor is like this dream, almost Prince Charming story of like, I'm going to find a mentor that's going to guide me through my career and help me do this. And that's just a bit too much to ask of someone else. But if you think of what you need in the moment, like, I just really need to find, maybe I need a co-founder for this. And that's what you need. And when you're talking to people, you're like, I'm just really looking for this. And you're connecting on this one thing. It makes it really easy for someone to jump in and go, I can introduce you. And they can't commit to you for the next 10 years of your company bill, but they're like, oh yeah, I can get you that introduction. So it's sort of good to have that one thing in mind. And usually I have kind of three things. And I've been in situations where I've started a conversation and they say, oh, what are you looking for? Can I help? I say, well, I'm looking for this hire. And they say, oh, I don't know. And they'll mention something. And suddenly I realize, wait a second, they can help me with number 3. Oh, I didn't even realize that was your background. Actually, I am trying to do this in Berlin. It sounds like and so I think is have those three asks. So your ask isn't, will you be my mentor, but more, can you help me with this thing? Because people want to help. It's just everybody is so busy and doesn't want to get, overcommit and doesn't want to have to say no. So it's really nice if you can have something specific that you're looking for.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I like that a lot. It's I think that's specific. We call it sort of like the forwardable ask, it's really difficult to make an introduction unless there's like a real tangible object or thing that you can make the introduction, or else it's just awkward. Hello,
Well,
my mother.
yeah, and Helene, I think what you just said about forwardable is another thing. Like, right, a lot of this happens via email, and I spend so much I was going to say day, but it's not day. It's always at night, right? Writing these emails, but being able to write a forwardable email and realizing that is just this is part of letting people help you, and making it easy for people to help you, is to have a really clear email that describes who you are and is really specific about what you're asking, and that you're responsive on those emails. When they ask you, you send the calendar invite, with information. I think one of the things sometimes people forget is that, even if someone offered to help you, they might not remember exactly, or they may want to help, but have other things on their mind, or they might not remember they remembered wanting to help, but not what your company is about. And so not being presumptive that they remember everything, and just saying, thanks so much for offering to introduce me to, this person, as a, reminder, or for further background, StoryFit does this and this and this, and we're really looking for this, and just really appreciate your help, and let me know if you need more information. Like, but doing that appropriately, and not putting too much of the burden on this person that you're asking for free help with.
Yeah. Free help is a difficult one too, because you also have to remember that everyone's time is worth something, right? So, it's valuable to have a really strategic ask and a very pointed one. So yeah, that's a really good point. And I can't tell you how many valuable introductions we've been able to help make when someone sends like a really concise white paper or case study or something that says, here's the so what, here's why you should care. It's a lot easier to be able to help, and we want to help, right? But being able to help, it's all relative based on what kind of information you have. So yeah, really good advice. So I'm going to keep going through some questions that I have here, but as a quick reminder to the audience, if you've got questions, this format works best if you are actively engaged in adding things in the chat. So please feel free to ask any questions that you have in the chat box, which I believe should be to your right. So my next question, I kind of want to back it up a little bit, go back towards the beginning of your story. So you mentioned a lot about, like the fundraising and your, how you got into this space, but I'm wondering, were you a solo founder? Did you start this process with a co-founder, or when did you decide to, stop things and bring in those additional team members?
I started with two co-founders. So I had a co-founder who was really an expert in the space. We started in publishing and then later moved to studios. And then I had another co-founder that was a technology expert. And this was someone that I had worked with in another company for many years. So I knew him really well, and we worked together. And so we started, neither of them ended up staying around forever though. So they're both gone for different reasons. For one person, it wasn't really a good fit to leave full time because, he had a good gig and wasn't ready for that kind of risk. And so it just wasn't a fit, after we kind of the initial start. And the other, as the company, we kind of outgrew where his expertise was, especially as we're moving deeper into machine learning and more onto the studio side. And so it really was an evolution. And I know this kind of evolution happens, all the time. Luckily, we did it all in, good relationships. I think I've literally spoken to both of them this week. But I think that's really one of the hard parts about founders. I would not recommend starting. Despite the fact that they're gone now, I would not have wanted to have started this on my own. I think you need just the heads and bouncing ideas off of and sharing the work really. But that was enough to kind of get us started and give me time to find another technical lead, give me time. So it was enough that allowed me to keep moving forward. You hear that's one of the, I don't know the exact percentage, I bet you know better than I do, but the causes of failure is founder issues, right? So finding the right founder and maybe putting everything down in paper so you have clarity and being clear about expectations and where you're going are so important. I just always feel for people who are trying to go through this, but I feel more it's almost a level of you're crazy if you're starting something solely by yourself. It just, I don't know. I guess that's a whole nother hour of reasons why not to do it, but I would just do it.
It is. It's hard. And shipping a product, like getting from nothing to something completely by yourself, is just a monumental amount of work. So when you were releasing, back, your MVP of what StoryFit is now, I'm assuming it probably didn't look much like what it is today, right? Because the goal of the MVP is just ship, right? So can you talk a little bit about your MVP, what that looked like, and how you got that catalyst energy to get it out?
Yeah, I think we did well on MVP and get it out, and test and grow, and so as a team, we were pretty good at that walkthrough. But we completely changed. I mean, even business models. Our first MVP was really a marketplace with both writers on one side and then the large publishers or studios on the other. And so we abandoned the whole marketplace idea and just became enterprise, B2B. So we changed not only the platform, but kind of everything. And really, I'd almost say there's a big break. We're not anything at all the same company as when we started. It's all built off of the learnings that we did early on, but we are a different company in every way, from technology to kind of platform build, to people except for me. So really, and I just think this is true of a lot of groups, and that's probably good to have in mind too, is that things are going to change and evolve, and that's kind of back to being honest with yourself of who you are, what your goals are. My current COO formed a studio before, and he talks about how they had a great partnership and they made lots of movies together, and at some point decided they had an interest in different types of movies, right? And so just being able to talk about that and make those changes and evolution, I think, is so important, because the founder team is so small that all of those relationship and communication issues are really important. I'm curious, from your side, Helena, when you guys are dealing with since you've got a marketplace, right, you're really connecting these investors and the people. And so I bet you have your own opinion on mistakes that early founders make trying to get into Cap Factory. Because I remember just figuring it all out and being like, wait, what am I supposed to do is hard. So I bet you have some good advice for people there.
Yeah, that's a really good one. And I'm happy to speak a little bit on it, but I don't, this is all about you. So if anyone has questions or anything you want to add in, please do. One of the number one problems, the founding team is definitely important, right? And that's one thing that Gordon Doherty, right, Capital Factory, our president, loves to say, is that when you are engaging in a relationship with a co-founder, it's like your husband or wife, right? That's a long-term relationship, and that can be very strategic. You can make a lot of mistakes there. So I do recommend, thinking really hard about the founders and folks that you want to go to market with. The second biggest issue that I've really seen, though, particularly with Capital Factory Accelerator and Ventures, a lot of time with founders, is they have such big ideas that it's hard to pick one thing, nail it down, and execute it and do it really, really well. We've had founders and, friends of mine, folks that I think are fantastic, that are some of the brightest, most intelligent people on the planet. They have so much going on that they're running in a couple of different directions. And it doesn't mean that the company can't be successful. It just makes it a little bit difficult from a venture perspective to understand the model, the financials going forward. How are you going to scale this thing if you have 10 different product lines or focuses? So picking one thing, being really, really good on it, being the expert in that one thing, I think is the way to make sure that you have yourself set in the right direction.
Yeah, I do think there's a real transition from the idea, and a lot of people start companies because they have this amazing vision and idea of what they want to do, but then you have to get really heads down and focused on that execution. And you just have a little bit of time before to execute it for proof, and the reason there's a little bit of time, unless you've got 3 co-founders, everybody maybe is able to keep their side jobs while they work on it. Maybe then you can stretch that out. But either way, there's a limited number of hours that you can work for free and get something done and make it fast enough that you don't lose the momentum. And so you really do have to flip from vision, like you said, and narrow it down into something you can execute. Because I see that people getting lost in that transition a lot.
Yeah, and it's hard too, because you want, a founder is the kind of person with the big vision, right? You want to make sure to, to foster that kind of creativity. But when it comes to execution and go to market, you really have to be very laser focused and put on the horse blinders. So yeah, I like that very much. So with that being said, I think we've got a couple of questions. So let's take a moment here just to bring up the first one. This is from Jacob Gus. He says, thanks for talking with us today, Monica. Question is in regards to finding strategic investors. Could you shed some light on how you went about finding and partnering with the right investors?
Oh yeah, that's a great question because I do have a lot of kind of stories and opinions on that actually. So early on, you kind of look at your friends and family or the angel groups, and it's like, even if you want strategic or if you want VCs, you're just not going to get them in that area. And I know there's a couple times when I was in that stage, I was like, oh, I think I'm ready for the next stage. And I'd spend a while having conversations, and it's just a waste of time because it's like, nope, you're not ready because I didn't have these basic proof cases. And so I think, first of all, finding the early investors is a stage. Now, I'll skip that just to answer where I think your question is on how do you find strategic investors or the right investors? And those can be two different things. So strategic means that you have usually a partnership with a company, or you found a large company that shares some piece of your vision and they realize they can't build as fast as you are, so they're willing to put their dollars behind you. I think sometimes it's always amazing that these big companies can't build something as quickly as you can or as efficiently. And so it really can be a really good partnership. The thing about strategic is they carry huge risk too. Like I've never seen kind of the good without you also being highly cognizant of the risk, because it's kind of always there. And for example, we took a strategic investment, but it delayed the piece that we did by almost a year. I mean, a whole year. And because what they wanted to do is turn their 500 person sales team into selling our product. But that took some real time, and we couldn't really go out and around them. So it meant that there weren't a lot of sales for a long time when we would have otherwise been out there selling it on our own and iterating it faster. And so on the one hand, it was great to have the money. We were certainly getting smarter and working, but we were not selling this one piece of the product during that time period that we were waiting to connect with them. And so I think the strategic can carry a lot of risk. The other thing is when you have preferred, like as you go each level, I will say that in general, the VC groups are easier to deal with on secondary and tertiary rounds than the strategic, because the strategic don't kind of follow the norms of investment. Like they may just be making this one investment, or it's a one-off. So things like follow-ons, they're not there. Like at one point we needed some more money, and they're like, oh no, we don't do that. So then you want to raise more money, and someone says, well, why aren't they giving you more? Well, they're strategic and they don't do follow-ons, like that's not their thing. But instead it looks like you have this big gaping hole of lack of support, basically. And so it can be a real count as a negative. And so I think that it is a plan to develop the strategic, but I guess my advice would be is to work on building a strategic partnership where you're working on a product, get them to invest in the product, maybe pay up front to build it. I mean, work out something where they're paying for the product if you can, instead of putting an investment and getting a piece. Because once they own that round or that preferred status, then every time you raise or do something, they have to agree to it. And whereas something might be really standard and any VC is going to sign off on it, it's like a no-brainer. Of course, that's what you're doing. It doesn't always match a large publicly traded company that's done a strategic deal with you. So I mean, now having said that, would I take the money? Yeah, I would take the money again. Like I needed the money at the time. So it's really, I'm giving you like good advice, but it's also like, well, if you need money, you don't want to go out of business, you take money. But in all cases, what ideally you do is turn that into money for the product, or for an advanced build, or for some specific on your roadmap that they can pay for in advance. And that way you get the money just the same, you deliver just the same, but you don't have some of the headaches of them being on your cap table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good piece of advice. And just sort of a follow-on question. I know we've got more, but I wanted to just kind of add an addendum onto that. So that was really great advice about strategic investors. There's also what people sort of call anecdotally strategic investors, right? So it's investors that you are choosing, assuming you have the choice of investors, choosing different folks to come in on the round.
Yeah.
And, again, like you said, assuming you don't need the money, you can be picky, right? You can pick and choose, these people have a bit more, tactical value than these people do, assuming you don't need the money for the round and you just need to get money in. Do you have any advice there on how you decide when it comes to institutional investors, what kinds of qualities to look for?
I mean, the best things to look for is communication. And I wouldn't say I've turned investors down as much as you can kind of let it just filter out if you sense that they're not. Like, I really watch for even the line of questioning. I remember the FFVC has been great for us. They're a lead investor a couple times. And I remember at the beginning as well, we'll come up with a deal that neither of us is quite satisfied with, but let's see what we can do. And he really came with the attitude of like, hey, what's important to you? I mean, it really felt like a collaboration of like, these are the real things that are important and this isn't. And I remember at one point he pushed something. I was like, look, that just feels punitive. Like that's not helpful for us. He was like, oh, well, what if we do it this way? But just that attitude and that conversation. But I also sensed that from the beginning of the questions. He's like, well, why are you doing it this way? Well, we're doing it this way. Oh, well, you can just tell. And I've also, there's other lines of questions that are incredibly, either combative or, demeaning is probably too strong a word. But I think you can learn a lot in those early questions. I've also, some kind of early conversations, it's almost like it's easy to anger if you don't say things the right way. And so there's just certain things I listen for that I try and avoid. But I think it really shows once you start any kind of negotiating, like, hey, are we negotiating in good faith where ideally it's a win-win? And, there's a lot of people who don't believe you can have a win-win situation. Sure. And if I had it, I'd say, like, I just don't even want to talk to someone who doesn't at least believe philosophically that we can both come out in a win. And so that's one of the things I look for. Now, there's a lot of, I'll try harder when I realize that not only is he, and I use the word he because I have yet to have
it's hard to break.
So I'm not even, it really is like, I'm thinking of specific people, but, he's got a background in studios, so I'm going to try a little harder for this person because I know that they're going to have an understanding. On the last round, I had this great balance of one group who really wanted to be involved. They care about certain aspects of the business. They want to really get involved and help. And I saw them as someone who could be really helpful. And then balance, the other big piece of it was a group that's like, yeah, we want to put our money in. If you need us, let us know, but we're really not going to be involved. We'll help you if you need it. And we always have, a follow-on amount. And I was like, perfect. I didn't need 20 of these, right? But you do need some help. And so those are some of the ways that I try and think about it. I hope that you and everyone have the luxury of being able to make these choices. When push comes to shove, I certainly have taken money and then later been like, oh, phew, they're great. They're great. Good, because I was going to take it anyway. Knock on wood right now, I'm just so pleased with my investor team. I mean, like, even when I'm there's sometimes when I'm not appreciative and the next thing I'm in a hole on something and they're just really have come in with all sorts of support, whether it's advice, introductions or money if I need it. Like, I've really I've really enjoyed all the investors that I've met along the way, and they've been really good. So I'm not sure how much that's because I chose them well. There's a little bit of luck involved there, I think.
Definitely. Luck and skill are both equally important in this kind of game. That's for sure. Yeah. I believe we have another question if we want to bring that up really quickly. Gordon Doherty. Hi, Gordon. Gordon's in the audience getting a shout out early in the event. So StoryFit targets a specific industry. How important is it to have team members or board members that know your industry versus those that are generalists and their general intelligence?
I think it's a really mix because I think it's most important really to have the team members that are the experts. And I enjoy my board because I think I have a really good balance of someone who is very well respected in the industry and kind of knows everyone in Hollywood, but also, BC that is raising money and making sure we're positioned for the next raise, expert in operations and running the company and running the board and making sure that everything is done well and that I'm not missing something. So I think having that mix, I would take it separately, because what I like is I feel like I have a plug on the board, within the board for all of these different types of roles. Like definitely someone watching my back per se. Like, am I forgetting something? Have I not dotted an I? Am I missing holes, whether it's in operations or sales, or even how I communicate this information? But that's very different from the person who is Hollywood centric and thinks about the product and knows our audience. And I would not want to have all of, like, it shouldn't be all of anyone.
The other, yeah.
Yeah, but I would say the team member is really something to think about from the beginning. And like I said, that's how that's part of why my founding team changed. It was no longer the right, founding team for this business. I think that's where you've got to have the industry expertise. You can know all you want to know about running a business and still not. I use the example of Hollywood in this case. I mean, even AT&T is getting out of it. I mean, like, it's its own industry, right? So I think that's where the really importance comes in. Gordon Doherty is one of my favorite people in Austin. So thank you, Gordon.
I think he's one of most people's favorite persons in Austin. So mutual. Got another question here, this time from Rachel Vaughn. She's curious about the role of mentors in your journey as an entrepreneur, especially here in Texas. How were mentors crucial to your startup success?
Yeah, well, like I certainly count Gordon as a mentor, for example, and he's someone that I've known and he's been with me the whole journey. But I really don't have that many people who have been that involved all the way. I've had wonderful mentors who have plugged in. I just feel like it's a little bit unrealistic to expect that you have this one person who kind of supports you through the whole thing. But I've had amazing people, and there's people that count me as their mentors, and all the time I'm like, okay, but you're kind of helping me too. So we're just figuring this out together. So I think that I would more just really celebrate the relationships, because if there's a give and take, it's almost always going to be a better, more long-term relationship. But 100%, like, I definitely couldn't have done this and wouldn't have wanted to have done this without all the support that I found, through Techstars, through Cap Factory, within Austin. I don't know if I've really answered the question, but I would say mentors are crucial. But I think reframing it, it's, I just think mentors has too much of a kind of a Prince Charming or whatever the right analogy is, but too much of this perfect answer to your needs that is not helpful to the idea. But help from others, 110%.
Great. So I do have one sort of last question. It's I don't know that anyone in the audience brought this up, but I know we're running short on time, and I want to make sure to ask it because it's an important one. As you're thinking about mentors, or really anyone that will come on to your company, something that's a common practice is using equity to compensate them. Was that something that you had difficulty navigating when you started? Did you feel uncomfortable giving equity points away, or do you have any advice for people that are concerned about giving away percentage points to the company?
I know a lot of people have that, and I don't. I would say, try this on if it makes sense, but I definitely am on the side of, I am not like caught up with holding on to equity. And I know that there's other people who maybe have regrets of not holding on to more and are really careful from the beginning. But my whole focus is growing. I just have come too close to death too many times to want to hold on to something that could be zero. So I really do try and be smart about it. And I appreciate the wisdom. That would be like an example of something I appreciate the wisdom of Gordon on, like that, of like, okay, you've seen a lot of these companies. Am I making the right decisions? But I just think like you're asking so much of people to work for less money and to really care, that I tend to be on the giving side of equity. But I'm you talk to someone else and they would just be like, nope, got to be careful. But I've not, regretted it yet. Another thing with equity when you're hiring is you've got that year cliff, right? If they don't work out, then there's not equity. And so I think you've got that protection. I would rather offer something, meaningful and let them live up to it than try and nickel and dime on equity and maybe not get your best people in.
Yeah, really good advice. I think we actually have one last question, and we'll bring that up and then we'll close out.
Mm-hmm.
So this is from Cindy, and she wants to know, Monica, can you elaborate on what role you ask your board to have in growing your business separate from your executive team?
Yeah, night and day separate. So the executive team is involved in all of the day-to-day management. And I mean, I think my board members are all brilliant. And if I could have them on my executive team, I'd be happy to, but they're not. And so they just can't get into the weeds. And it's kind of unfair for them to think about it that way. So I really am bringing up high level information to the board. It's kind of funny because I'll talk to the board and they'll be like, oh, you're too detail oriented, this and that. And then I talk to my team and they're like, Monica, you're missing all the details. So
high level.
Yeah. So really you have to jump those different levels. So the board is really about big picture. And I think the last board meeting, we kind of checked all the boxes. And so they're like, all right, let's make sure we're talking about 2022. Now, my executive team, we're trying to close out this month and this quarter, and we have a strong 90-day plan, but we're really making things happen on that level. And the board is making sure you're really planning ahead and leading to those next growth stages. And I think, and they're also there to capture, I think, some of because of usually more experience, they're there to capture maybe potential, legal pitfalls or kind of those broader issues that you might not be considering yet. So that's really the separation that I see.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Monica. It was wonderful chatting with you today. I really genuinely enjoyed this. I'm hoping the audience did too. So any parting words of wisdom for our audience here today?
Oh my gosh, good luck and don't give up and keep asking for help and reaching out to others. I guess that would be it.
Awesome. Short but sweet. Thank you so much. Everyone, thanks y'all for joining us today. Please join me in thanking Monica for joining us, and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thanks.
Bye.